It happened over veal and Pinot Noir. The kind of dinner where every course is served with judgment and every compliment has a knife tucked inside it. My family always had a way of making success look elegant and failure feel like a personal disgrace. And that night, I became their disgrace. We were seated around the massive dining room table in my parents' house, the one with the chandelier they imported from Italy, and the chairs no one ever dared spill wine on. It was my father's birthday, which meant the whole clan had come out in full force. My older brother Greg and his wife Dana, with their two perfect children and their even more perfect mortgage. My younger sister Amelia, who just made partner at the firm and couldn't let you forget it. And then there was me, the one who left a stable job to chase a dream. I was 29. I'd recently quit my position at a major consulting firm to build my own online education platform for artists and creators. It wasn't glamorous yet, it wasn't profitable yet, but for the first time in years, I was doing something that actually felt like mine. Unfortunately, that meant nothing in the world I came from. Greg was the first to take a jab. He tilted his wine glass and asked casually, "Still doing that computer art thing?" "It's a platform for creators," I replied, keeping my tone measured. "We help them monetize their skills, grow their audience." Greg cut me off, grinning. "So, like YouTube, but for people who can't get real jobs?" Everyone laughed, except me. Dana, his wife, jumped in with her usual brand of polite condescension. "I mean, it's cute. Everyone goes through a find-yourself phase in their 20s. God knows I tried yoga teacher training." From across the table, Amelia smirked and added, "Except you didn't quit your career to do it, Dana." Laughter again. My mother half-heartedly tried to settle things. Now, let's not gang up on anyone." But she didn't stop them. She never did. Not when I was the target. I stayed quiet, letting the swirl of insults pass over me like I wasn't even there. Then my father, who hadn't said much all night, put down his wine glass and looked directly at me. "You know, sweetheart," my dad said, in that calm, measured tone that always felt like a warning more than a statement, "we just worry you're not being realistic. These things, startups, platforms, apps, they burn out. Fast. I saw a report last week, 90% of them fail." Of course he saw a report. He always did. "I'm not expecting overnight success," I said, trying to hold my ground. "But I believe in it. I've got a small user base already. Engagement is growing. I'm pitching to angel investors next month." Greg scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "That sounds expensive. How are you funding it? Or are you just living off savings?" I hesitated. I was living off savings. My apartment was modest, and I'd cashed out my 401k, a decision I hadn't shared with anyone. Greg raised his eyebrows and gave a short laugh. "Let me guess, no health insurance either?" My hand tightened around my fork. I kept my voice steady as I replied, "I'm figuring it out." Greg didn't miss a beat. "Of course you are. You'll be lucky if you can afford your rent in a year." No one laughed this time, not because it wasn't cruel, but because they all silently agreed. I looked down at my plate. The veal had gone cold. The birthday cake for Dad sat untouched at the far end of the table. My mother was busy sipping her wine. My father just stared at his glass like nothing had been said. No one stood up for me, not even a word of encouragement, not even a "give her a chance." Just polite silence. And somehow, that was worse. It wasn't the teasing that broke me. It was the way they had already decided I was lost. A failure. The dinner ended shortly after. I helped clear a few plates before making an excuse about an early morning and slipping out the front door. As I walked to my car, the cold air stung my face. I sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes, staring at the dashboard, willing myself not to cry. Not because I needed their approval, but because I had hoped, deep down, that maybe I'd earned their respect by now. But to them, I was just the foolish middle child who turned her back on a 6-figure salary and a prestigious career path to play on the internet. That night, I went back to my one-bedroom apartment and opened my laptop. The login screen glowed like a challenge. My inbox had 14 unread messages, Support requests, user feedback, a few newsletter signups. None of it paid the bills. But for the first time, I saw something else. Potential. That dinner didn't light a fire in me. I already had the fire. What it did was strip away the noise. It made it painfully clear that I didn't need to earn a seat at their table anymore. I was going to build something so solid, so undeniable, that I'd never again question my worth. Not even in their presence. Not for revenge, not to prove anything. But because I finally realized I deserved to be proud of myself, even if they never were. And I was just getting started. There's a kind of silence that follows humiliation. Not just the silence from others, but the kind that settles deep in your bones. For months after that dinner, I barely heard from anyone in my family. No check-ins, no texts, not even a birthday call. It was like I'd quietly been voted off the island and no one bothered to tell me. But I didn't have time to dwell on that. I was drowning in bills, beta testers, pitch decks, and code. My days started before sunrise. I'd wake up in my freezing apartment, wrap myself in a blanket, and check server logs while sipping instant coffee. From 9 to 5, I worked at a co-working space downtown to save on power. From 6 to midnight, I delivered groceries through 2 different apps just to keep my phone bill paid. Every penny I made went back into the platform, my platform. I called it Craftory, a space for creators to teach what they knew and build their own businesses. I believed it could empower artists the way Shopify had empowered small sellers. But belief doesn't keep the lights on. I remember one afternoon, sitting in a subway station with my laptop open, piggybacking off the station's Wi-Fi because my home connection had been cut off. I was debugging a payment integration bug while the floor beneath me smelled like spilled beer and old gum. And I thought, what if Greg's right? What if I really am just playing grown-up? The doubt crept in during the quiet moments. When no signups came in for days. When a freelancer ghosted me mid-project. When a small investor backed out 2 hours before our scheduled contract call. But even in those moments, I couldn't let go. Something deeper than pride kept me going. It wasn't about showing my family they were wrong. That ship had sailed. This was about proving to myself that I could finish something I started, that I could create something valuable on my own terms. One of the lowest points came when I got sick. Just a bad flu, but it hit hard. No insurance, no backup. I still had to deliver groceries and fix back-end code with a fever. One night, delirious and exhausted, I collapsed on my apartment floor with my laptop on my stomach. I woke up 4 hours later, the screen still glowing, displaying an error message I didn't have the energy to fix. And yet, even then, I kept going. Eventually, something shifted. It started with an email. A woman named Marissa had used my platform to sell watercolor tutorials to her Instagram followers. She wrote, "This is the first time I've made rent from my art. Please don't give up on this. People like me need it." I stared at her message for 10 minutes, letting the weight of it settle. I wasn't just building a tool. I was giving people freedom, a way out, a voice. After that, more instructors signed up. Small-time creators with niche talents, glassblowers, indie musicians, even a guy who taught calligraphy on skateboards. My users were weird and wonderful and real. Traffic doubled over the next 4 months. Then an email came from a content strategist at a mid-sized media firm. Her message read, "We love what you're building. Are you open to outside investment?" That was the day everything began to shift. I didn't scream or celebrate. I just sat very still. And then I cried, because finally, something was cracking open. The first funding round was small but meaningful. Enough to hire one developer and cover my personal expenses for 6 months. I moved into a slightly bigger place, still modest, but with working Wi-Fi and a window that didn't whistle when it rained. I didn't tell anyone in my family. By then, Amelia was posting about her firm's expansion into Europe. Greg had started a podcast about discipline and generational wealth. I still followed them, silently, never commenting. There was no bitterness, just distance. like they were characters from a life I'd quietly exited. 2 years passed. Craftory grew slowly but steadily. We reinvested every cent, kept our team lean, and stayed off the radar. I turned down press. I didn't want to be a woman in tech headline. I just wanted to build. Somehow, in that silence, I had carved out a space that was mine, authentically mine. And then, something unexpected happened. A quiet alert popped up on my investor dashboard one afternoon. One of the portfolios we'd recently acquired, part of an undervalued creative firm with good infrastructure, held partial stock in a mid-sized consulting group that was struggling financially. I clicked the details and froze. The consulting group was the one my father's company owned. The name was unmistakable. They were attempting to pivot into digital education and onboarding systems, trying to modernize, clearly floundering. They were stuck in legacy processes and hadn't adapted to new platforms. Layoffs were being rumored. An acquisition offer had been declined by a competitor. I stared at the screen, heart racing. I could have backed out, could have walked away. But I didn't. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, because it made sense. Their systems were outdated. Their model was stale, and my company could fix it. We could modernize the offering, restructure the team, and reach a demographic they'd never understood. To me, it wasn't personal. It was just good business. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork, acquisition offers, and corporate maneuvering. By the end of the quarter, Craftery officially became the majority stakeholder in the consulting firm my father had helped build. Quietly, cleanly, without fanfare. They didn't even know who was behind it, and I had no intention of telling them. Not yet. One day, I overheard a conversation at a networking event between two consultants from their firm. "This buyout's a nightmare," one of them muttered. "We're being restructured from the inside. New leadership, new strategy. No one knows who's running the ship." The other one shook his head. "Some millennial tech company. We're not even sure if it's led by a man or a woman. No one's met them. No press. No CEO interviews. It's weird." I just smiled and walked past. By then, I had no need to explain myself. But fate wasn't finished yet. Because a few weeks later, I got an email invitation from Amelia. The subject line read, "Dad's retirement party. Hope you can come." The location? One of Craftory's corporate event properties. They'd booked the venue for his final send-off. They had no idea I owned it. And suddenly, everything came full circle. The invitation was polite, short, just 5 sentences. Amelia's email read, "Dad's retiring this spring, and we're throwing a party in his honor. We've booked a corporate venue in Midtown. It's apparently pretty new and very sleek. Catered, open bar, cocktail attire. Hope you can come. It's been a while." There was no apology for the years of silence. No mention of the dinner where they'd dismantled my dignity, one mocking comment at a time. Just a blanket assumption that I'd fall back into place. I almost deleted the email. But I didn't. Not out of revenge. I wasn't that person anymore. I decided to go for one reason only. I needed to see if I still felt small around them, if their opinions still had weight. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to watch them walk into a room they didn't know I owned. Because the venue they'd booked? It was one of ours. A Craftery property, part of a boutique corporate event portfolio we'd quietly acquired the year before. Sleek, modern, state-of-the-art, designed for creative product launches, investor galas, and leadership summits. I had personally overseen the interior design. The fact that my sister booked it without knowing made the irony almost poetic. On the night of the event, I arrived early. I wore a deep navy dress, tailored perfectly. Not flashy, not ostentatious, just clean, composed, and powerful. My hair was pinned back, my earrings subtle. The only thing I let myself enjoy too much was the heels. Italian leather, elegant, and nearly silent on the polished floors. I watched from one of the side corridors as the guests began to arrive. Greg and Dana were first. Dana wore pearls, of course. Greg made a show of shaking hands and laughing too loudly. Greg glanced around the room and muttered, "Bit cold in here. Looks like the kind of place a startup rents before it goes under." Dana smiled politely and replied, "The lighting's terrible, makes my foundation look orange." They had no idea they were standing in one of our highest-earning properties. Amelia arrived next with 2 colleagues from her firm. She glanced up at the ceiling and murmured to one of them, "I wish we had a venue like this for our executive events. It's tasteful, minimalist. Too bad it's owned by some faceless firm. No one's even sure who runs it." I let them talk. I stayed in the background, watching them drink and socialize, completely unaware of the ground they stood on. My parents arrived last. My mother in a pale silk blouse, her silver hair swept back neatly. My father looked tired, his posture less rigid than I remembered. Retirement had softened him, just a little. He shook hands with the event staff I had personally trained. He didn't recognize a single face. One of our team members, Marcus, caught my eye from across the room. He gave me a subtle nod. Everything was ready. At precisely 8:30, a hush fell across the room as the event coordinator stepped to the microphone. She was young, sharp, and unflinching, another rising leader from Craftery. She tapped the mic gently. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here tonight to honor Mr. Charles Langford and his remarkable career. Please take your seats for a brief program and toast." My father took a modest bow as the room applauded. He sat near the front with my mother, basking in the moment. I stayed standing, tucked near the back of the room. The coordinator continued, "We're proud to host this event here at the Spire, one of the newest properties in the Craftory Collective portfolio. And tonight, we're also honored to introduce a special guest, someone whose leadership has helped shape the very space you're standing in." She glanced toward me, then turned back to the crowd. "Before we raise our glasses, I'd like to welcome the founder and CEO of Craftory, who also happens to be our host this evening." I stepped forward. The room went still. I could feel the energy shift the moment my heels echoed on the floor. Greg's face froze mid-sip. Dana actually set her glass down mid-air. Amelia blinked 3 times as if trying to process what she was seeing. And my father? He didn't stand. He didn't blink. He just stared at me, expressionless. I took the mic. My voice was calm, steady. "Good evening. I wasn't originally planning to speak tonight, but then again, I wasn't originally supposed to own this building either." A faint ripple of nervous laughter moved through the crowd. I continued. 3 years ago, I left the corporate world to build something of my own. Quietly, privately, without much fanfare. I didn't do it to prove anything. I did it because I believed creators, real creators, deserved better platforms, better tools, better spaces to grow. I looked directly at Greg. Back then, some people thought it was a phase. I turned to Dana. Some found it amusing. And finally, I met my father's eyes. Some thought it was a mistake. I paused, letting the silence stretch. But tonight, I have the privilege of welcoming you to this space, a place built by people who were once overlooked, underestimated, mocked. And I hope you feel as honored to be here as I am to stand before you. No applause, just silence, thick, stunned, stretching across every table. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I just handed the mic back to the coordinator and stepped off the stage. Behind me, I heard my father rise from his chair. Slowly, I turned. He said nothing at first, just looked at me, unreadable. Then he cleared his throat and addressed the room. "Before we raise our glasses," he said, voice low but firm, "there's something I think everyone should see." He turned to one of the AV technicians, my AV technician, and nodded. The technician tapped a few keys. The lights dimmed. A video began to play on the massive screen behind the stage. The logo of Craftory filled the screen. And then the numbers: user growth, creator income, platform expansion, recent acquisitions. And finally, the confirmation that stunned the room. Craftory, now the majority owner of Langford Consulting Group, my family's company. I watched as the truth settled in. My brother's jaw clenched. Amelia leaned forward, reading every word like it couldn't possibly be true. Dana's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. And my father? He didn't look shocked. He looked old. He turned back to the crowd and said quietly, "I suppose we all have some catching up to do." The silence that followed my father's words felt like the entire room had stopped breathing. On the massive screen behind him, the last slide remained frozen. Craftory's logo alongside the words, "Majority Stakeholder, Langford Consulting Group." It wasn't just a name on a screen, it was their company, their legacy. Mine now. Greg was the first to speak. He looked from the screen to my father, then to me, his voice thick with disbelief. "You're telling me she owns the company now?" My father didn't answer. He just walked slowly back to his seat. Greg turned toward me, louder now. "Is this some kind of stunt? Are you messing with us?" I looked at him calmly and said, "No, Greg, this isn't a stunt. This is business." Dana stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. "But you were broke. You were living in some tiny apartment. How?" I met her gaze without blinking. "That was 4 years ago. While you were laughing at my phase, I was building something. Quietly. Without shortcuts. Without your approval." Amelia stepped forward, arms crossed. Her voice was low, accusatory. "So this was your plan? Buy us out and humiliate us? Use this party to rub it in?" I shook my head. "This isn't about revenge, Amelia. If I wanted to humiliate you, I would have sent a memo. I came tonight because I was invited. You chose the venue. I accepted the offer. That's all." "But why buy our company?" she demanded. "Because it made sense," I said. "Langford Consulting was failing. Your leadership was outdated. Your onboarding systems were 20 years old. Your employee turnover was catastrophic, and you had no plan for scaling digital. You needed help. I offered it, indirectly. The board accepted. It was a clean transaction, legal, professional." I turned to face the room, my voice steady but resolute. "I didn't build Craftory to prove anything to any of you. I did it because I believed in what I was creating, because I knew there were thousands of people, artists, makers, educators, who needed a platform that didn't exploit them." I looked around the room, stopping at each familiar face. "You called me a failure at your dinner table. You laughed when I told you I had a vision. You dismissed me like I was a child playing dress-up with spreadsheets." Greg muttered, "We were trying to protect you." "No," I said sharply, turning to face him. "You were trying to control me. There's a difference." No one spoke. I walked slowly to the center of the room, heels clicking against the marble floor, and stood where every face could see mine. "I didn't need your permission then," I continued, "and I don't need your validation now. What I needed, what I found, was a path that didn't require me to shrink myself to fit your expectations." There was a long pause. Then a voice from one of the back tables broke the silence. It was Carter, my cousin. He was only 24, working in IT, often overlooked in family conversations. He stood up and said, "I've been following Craftory. I didn't know you were behind it, but it's brilliant, really. You've helped so many people. I just wanted to say, congratulations." That cracked the dam. A few younger cousins clapped. One of my aunts looked away in embarrassment. Dana picked up her wine glass again, as if trying to pretend she hadn't been part of it. Greg sat down heavily, staring at nothing. Amelia didn't say a word. She just folded her arms tighter, jaw clenched. My father, finally, spoke again. He stood, slowly, and faced me. "I underestimated you," he said. The room was still. I held his gaze. "Yes, you did." He nodded once. Then he sat back down. No apology, no embrace, just that. But that was enough. I turned to the event coordinator, nodded, and the staff began to reset the room for dinner. People started murmuring to each other, unsure of what to do next. I walked off to the side, toward the hallway that led to the balcony. I needed air. Quiet. As I stepped outside, The city stretched out before me in golden lights and reflections. Somewhere below, life kept moving. Taxis honked, distant music played, the world spun on. And behind me, for once, I had left my family speechless. Not with anger, not with theatrics, with success, earned, quiet, complete. A few minutes later, someone joined me on the balcony. It was Carter again. He said softly, "I meant what I said in there. It's inspiring. What you did. I've been thinking about leaving my job to start something, but I was scared." I smiled at him. "Then let them be scared of you someday. Just don't wait for their approval. You'll die waiting." He nodded slowly. "Thank you." And then he left. I stayed a few moments longer, breathing in the city night. Inside, the party continued, but everything had changed. They would try to go back to normal, pretend they weren't shocked. Maybe some would twist the narrative. Others might reach out later to reconnect. It didn't matter. I wasn't that girl at the table anymore. I wasn't afraid of their judgment, because they no longer sat at the head of mine. I didn't go back inside right away. The air on the balcony felt easier to breathe. The sounds of clinking glasses and awkward conversation spilled out behind me through the half-open doors, but I let them fade. I needed just a few more minutes alone. My fingers rested on the cool metal railing, and I watched the city light ripple across the glass towers like waves. Midtown was buzzing. Life was moving on. And I was too. Somewhere behind those walls, my family was absorbing a truth they never could have imagined. The daughter they once called foolish now owned the very company they treated as their legacy. The room they were standing in, my space, the people they just toasted with, my team, the systems they now worked under, my vision. I thought I would feel triumphant. Instead, I felt calm. When I finally stepped back inside, it was like entering a new atmosphere. People stood in scattered groups, low murmurs passing between them. Some were still glancing at the screen, which had gone black again. Others were sipping champagne slowly, faces unreadable. I didn't need applause. I didn't want a standing ovation. Silence was enough. It told me everything I needed to know. I moved through the room quietly, weaving between people who suddenly weren't sure how to look me in the eye. Greg was the first to break the ice. He approached with a glass of scotch in one hand and that same crooked smile he always used when he was about to lie. He tried to play it casual. "Well, I guess I owe you a drink, huh?" I turned toward him, not amused. "You owe me nothing, Greg." He blinked, surprised by how flat my tone was. "Come on, yeah, I said some stuff back then, but none of us really knew." "No," I interrupted. "You didn't know, because you never asked. You assumed, and then you laughed. That was always the problem." He shifted, suddenly unsure of where to look. "I didn't think you'd take it so personally," he muttered. "We were just trying to look out for you." I narrowed my eyes. "You don't look out for someone by belittling them at your dinner table." There was a pause. Greg's mouth opened slightly, then shut again. Finally, he mumbled, "Well, either way, what you've done is impressive." "Seriously? No hard feelings?" I gave a small smile. Not warm, just controlled. "I'm not angry anymore, but I've learned to remember who people were when they thought I had nothing to offer." He swallowed hard and gave a short nod. "Got it." He backed away a few steps, then turned and disappeared into the crowd. Next came Dana. She didn't try to make small talk. She looked me over and said, "You looked powerful up there, like someone you don't interrupt." I raised my eyebrow slightly. "That's because I am." Dana nodded slowly. "Guess we read you wrong." I said nothing. She waited for a beat, maybe hoping I'd soften. When I didn't, she gave a weak smile and walked away. I didn't expect an apology from Amelia, and she didn't offer one. She stood near the bar, her back straight as a ruler, engaged in an overly animated conversation with a junior associate. She didn't look my way once, but I could feel her attention flickering in my direction. Her entire posture screamed, "Don't give her the satisfaction." That was fine. I didn't need it. We had nothing left to say. And then my mother approached. She walked toward me slowly, 2 glasses of champagne in her hands. She wore her polite expression, the one she used at fundraisers and charity auctions. The one that said everything was fine, even when it wasn't. She held out a glass. I didn't take it. Her voice was calm, but careful. "You've done well for yourself." I tilted my head slightly. "That's it?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, my voice low and even, "after all the dinners, the lectures, the silence when I needed support, after all that, this is what you have for me? You've done well?" Her jaw tightened. "We were afraid. You were always different, and different makes people nervous." I studied her face. The makeup, the posture, the pearls. There wasn't malice there, just fear. A lifetime of guarding herself against anything unfamiliar. "I didn't need you to believe in my ideas," I said quietly. "I just needed you not to laugh when I tried." Her eyes flickered. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. After a long pause, she placed the untouched glass on a nearby table. "I suppose I didn't understand you," she said softly. "Maybe I still don't." And then she turned and walked away. It wasn't closure, but it was something. Later, as guests started trickling out, I stood near the entrance, saying polite goodbyes. A few of my father's former colleagues came over to shake my hand, their eyes full of questions they didn't dare ask. A couple of younger cousins, ones who had once ignored me entirely, smiled shyly and told me how cool the company was. But the moment that stuck with me came just before I left. Carter, my cousin in IT, approached hesitantly. "I didn't know you were the one behind Craftery," he said. "I've been following the platform for months. I even applied to teach a tech series on it last week." I smiled. "Did you get approved?" He nodded. "Yeah, yesterday." "Then I guess we'll be working together?" He laughed softly, then turned serious. "I just wanted to say, what you did, it matters. It gave me courage. I've been scared to leave my job and try something of my own. But tonight," he paused, shaking his head. "Tonight changed something for me." I put a hand on his shoulder. "Then don't wait for them to understand you first. Just start." He nodded. "Thanks." When he walked away, I felt something settle in my chest. Something peaceful. Finally, when the last glass was cleared and the music began to fade, I picked up my coat and walked toward the doors. No one tried to stop me. I stepped into the lobby, where my logo glowed faintly above the front desk, Craftory Collective. 4 years ago, I couldn't afford my rent. Now I owned the room they were still trying to figure out how to belong in. Outside, a black car waited at the curb. The doorman opened the door as I approached. I took one last look at the building behind me. This had once been their world. I had stepped into it, reshaped it, and walked out taller. I thought of the woman I used to be, the girl who sat quietly at their table, biting her tongue, shrinking to fit their comfort. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who no longer asked for a seat. She built her own table, her own name, her own empire, and now she was done explaining herself. As I stepped into the car and closed the door behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not pride, not even triumph. Peace. They could keep their dinner table. I had built my own. And at mine, everyone earns their seat.